Why is JAGMEET Singh and the NDP keeping Justin Trudeau in power?
Everyone has an opinion about Canadian federal politics.
Oh, yeah.
Hey gang, what's up? Just Aaron right here, Canadian Looney, coming to you from what is turning out to be a sunny day in Nova Scotia. What is up with JAGMEET Singh? Is it all just about his pension? We've got Michelle Rempel Garner here, an MP from Calgary, that's going to explain what is up, in her opinion, with JAGMEET and Trudeau, and why JAGMEET Singh will do nothing to go against Trudeau or the Liberal Party. A lot of people say it's just his pension. Michelle Rempel Garner seems to think it's more complicated than that. Let's take a look and a listen to her opinions, see if we gain any information. I know that some people say that Michelle Rempel Garner is a WEF member. I don't know if that's true anymore. I believe it was in the past, but I've been told, or I've heard, that PIERRE Poilievre doesn't want any Conservative members of his caucus in the WEF. Anyhow, we're going to jump into Michelle Rempel Garner explaining why JAGMEET Singh is in Trudeau's pocket. Let's take a look and a listen. It's a thorough explanation.
Why is JAGMEET Singh and the NDP keeping Justin Trudeau in power? So this is a question I get all the time. Why are the NDP propping up the Liberals? So I'm not going to purport to be a member of the Liberals or the NDP, but I want to walk you through today why, like, the logical argument that JAGMEET Singh, logical, will make for this, what the real reasons are, but I also want to break down for you what JAGMEET Singh's future could look like in light of two by-elections that have just been called in Winnipeg as well as in Montreal. So there's been and I'll just briefly speak to that before I get into the meat of things. There's been a lot of articles over the last couple of days talking about Justin Trudeau's future and whether Justin Trudeau will be able to survive as leader if he doesn't win these two by-elections. But I actually think the question should be focused on JAGMEET Singh, and no mainstream media article is talking about this. So everything that I'm going to refer to here, there's a link in the comments. If you're watching this on YouTube, the link is in the video description. There's an article that has all the links that I'm talking about here. It's the analysis of what I'm about to break down for you. The reason why I'm going to ask you to subscribe to this newsletter is it's free. And also because Justin Trudeau has created censorship laws in Canada, which makes it incredibly difficult for me to communicate to you. So if you click subscribe on this newsletter, it helps me A, get the word out, B, communicate with you directly, and C, skip Justin Trudeau's censorship laws. So we're going to talk about all these things, but let's start with why JAGMEET Singh is propping up the Liberals. There are many reasons. So JAGMEET Singh, if he was answering this question, would say, well, I'm in a quote, supply and confidence agreement with the federal Liberal government because it's allowing us to get our priorities passed. Well, here's the thing. His quote unquote priorities, there's no polling evidence to suggest that Canadians appreciate these efforts. In fact, some of the priorities that they've put forward have been roundly criticized by provincial governments, including the government of Quebec. And moreover, the NDP are supporting the Liberals in some sincerely disastrous policies, the carbon tax, hard drug decriminalization, propping them up through many series of policy gaffes that have led to massive inflation, the housing crisis, breaking Canada's immigration system. These are all things that the NDP are they're just day after day. I watch it in the House of Commons that they are supporting the Liberals on. So when you write, or if you ever drop a note in my comments and say like, oh well, we need a confidence motion now, Michelle, you need a vote of non-confidence. Well, the Conservative Party have put literally dozens of non-confidence motions forward in the House of Commons, but they don't pass because the NDP is propping the Liberals up. So let's get back to why. So number one is they will say it's because of their agreement and getting priorities passed through, but that doesn't hold water. That's not an argument that holds water in polling data. So this week, Conservative Party leader Pierre Poilievre unleashed a series of devastating ads. Again, the link to all of this is in the comments. There's an article there for you. You can click subscribe and you can see all of these things in here. But Pierre Poilievre put out some very serious ads basically saying that the NDP, that JAGMEET Singh is propping up the Liberals, even beyond policy, like in procedural motions that keep the Liberals from being held to account in the House of Commons, because he doesn't vest his MP pension until 2025. So these ads are suggesting that JAGMEET Singh is an opportunist who is only trying to keep Justin Trudeau and the Liberals in power so that they don't go to an election, and that he doesn't have to risk losing his seat and losing his pension until February 2025. Now, that is not a message that is going to, like when people hear that, and I'm sure you hear me say that, that makes people angry, right? But JAGMEET Singh really hasn't done anything to prove otherwise. He's literally carried the Liberals' water on everything. But the interesting thing is that he doesn't have anything to show for it. It's not like he's making electoral gains, right? The last by-election that was held in Toronto St. Paul's, this is a riding in core urban Toronto that was that's actually held by the provincial NDP in Ontario, that the NDP's vote share went down. So logically, if JAGMEET Singh's argument that like, oh, well, this agreement that we're in with the Liberals is so great and it's to benefit Canadians, you think it would have translated at the polls, but it didn't. The second reason why a lot of people will speculate that JAGMEET Singh is propping up the Liberal government is because his party literally can't afford to go to an election. Under his leadership, he's now lost 2 general elections in 2019 and 2021. He has not been able to come even close to the high watermark of support that Jack Layton saw in 2011. And more importantly, he hasn't been able to fundraise. So because he hasn't been able to pick a lane or differentiate himself from the Liberal government, in fact, they're all kind of the same brand, right? Like the Liberal NDP government, we call it that for a reason. It's because they vote with each other on everything. Because he hasn't been able to differentiate himself as different from Justin Trudeau, he hasn't been able to expand his donor base. Nobody wants to donate, who wants change in government is going to donate to JAGMEET Singh. And why? Because he's propping the government up. Like, he can't go out and argue for change. He's literally, see, anybody who wants change in the election, he's literally just given it up. So who's going to donate to him? So what we've seen, there was data that came out this week that showed just how little the NDP has been able to fundraise. And so he literally can't afford to go to an election. Their war chest is empty. So he's got his pension that he's going to vest in 2025. Conservatives are making an argument that he's trying to wait it out till there. He doesn't really have much funds in his coffers, his war chest, so he can't go to an election, so they're continuing to prop it up. The other interesting point that a lot of people haven't talked about, and again, the link in the comments, please click subscribe. Everything's in here that I'm talking about. You can share this article. But another reason that nobody's really talked about is like JAGMEET Singh's caucus, his group of MPs, is also, it's really small. There's not a lot of MPs. They're the 4th party in the House of Commons. And he's actually lost. He's had several senior, longtime veterans, members of the NDP announce that they're not going to reoffer in the next election. So, you know, this isn't a comment on their politics, but these are senior MPs that know how to communicate, that could arguably augment some of JAGMEET Singh's weaknesses, like Charlie Angus or Daniel Blakey. Charlie Angus said that he's retiring. Daniel Blakey has retired already. This is why there's a by-election in Winnipeg. JAGMEET Singh's going to have a really hard time replacing those candidates because of his dismal polling numbers, because of his lack of fundraising efforts, and more importantly, because he's like literally just voting for everything that Justin Trudeau puts through, right? So that's problematic as well too. So attracting candidates, that's also a problem for the NDP, and that's also another reason why they are propping up the Liberals and trying to avoid an election, right? So that's another huge thing. The other thing is that JAGMEET Singh, and again, I go through this on the link in the comments about, it's an article all about analyzing JAGMEET Singh's leadership. Nobody has ever accused JAGMEET Singh of being a policy heavyweight in debate or being like a great orator in the House of Commons. And, you know, you guys are watching me communicate on digital media right now. Where is his presence online? His digital presence has been, you know, at best non-existent and like vaguely cringe from time to time. This is not a leader who knows how to communicate issues on a regular basis, especially when, and like it is worth re-emphasizing this, he is voting for everything that Justin Trudeau puts forward. They are literally the same person. I see this in the House of Commons. They prop everything up. So they prop each other up. Just to re-emphasize, When you email my office and you go, oh, hey, Michelle, we need a vote of non-confidence in the House of Commons. Okay, well, guess what? Jagmeet Singh is just going to vote with the Liberals to keep them in power, right? So it's hard for him to communicate that he is an agent of change when he's literally doing everything in his power to keep the status quo alive, right? Okay. Now, the other reason why I think that they are trying to avoid an election and that there's a problem with Jagmeet Singh's leadership. Again, the link is in the comments. Please read all of this. And this is under discussed, is the difference between the Liberals' mechanisms or lack thereof to get rid of a leader versus the NDP. The Liberal Party, like their governance, their constitution, they don't have a mechanism to get rid of Justin Trudeau in between an election. They actually don't have that. Their delegates allowed their leadership to gut their constitution so that there's no mechanism to oust a leader. And also the Liberals voted against something called the Reform Act, which gives parliamentary caucuses the power to oust a leader. So the Liberals don't have a mechanism to oust their leader. So Justin Trudeau, people are saying like, oh, well, if he loses this by-election, it might be the end for him. Well, the only way Justin Trudeau is going is if it's on his own volition or if he loses in a general election. That is not the case for Jagmeet Singh for several reasons. Number one, the NDP constitution contains mechanisms by which they could turf a leader, number one. Number two, there are many other people of his political flavor across the country that could easily step into his shoes. Like, it's not like the federal Liberals where there's not an obvious successor. There are people that could easily step into Jagmeet Singh's shoes and do a better job. The last reason is that Jagmeet Singh's voter base, even though I do not, like his membership in the NDP, even though I don't share their politics, they have been, unlike the federal Liberals, very, very open to criticize Jagmeet Singh's leadership and their deal with the federal Liberals. In fact, in the NDP's last convention, and again, this is all linked in the article that's in the comments or in the video description, there were many delegates that were like, what are we getting out of this? You're giving the Liberal government all of this confidence. Where is the supply, right? The Liberal government has literally jerked Jagmeet Singh around for years. And they're like, oh, well, we're going to keep voting in favor of this. And it's mind-boggling to me. But I just want you to know that, like, in a situation like this, and I guess the last reason why they're supporting the federal Liberals is they are rudderless as a party. I watched this in the House of Commons. They don't have a policy message. They don't have a policy lane. The federal Conservatives, by contrast, we have offered under Pierre Poilievre a very clear message and a very clear contrast to the federal Liberal government. We are going to axe the tax, particularly the very controversial and costly carbon tax. We're going to build homes in a housing crisis. We've got a whole series of policies to deal with that. We're going to stop crime. We've got a whole series of policies to deal with that. And we're going to fix the budget. And we vote accordingly. We vote against Liberal and NDP policies that are antithetical to those positions. But meanwhile, Jagmeet Singh is trying to figure out, okay, well, how do I look like an agent of change when I'm trying to prop up the Liberal government so that I can avoid an election because I don't have money in the bank and because for my campaign war chest and because, as Pierre Poilievre's ads allude to, he's waiting out his pension in 2025. So for me, I found it very curious over the last, week since these by-elections have been called, excuse me, that there's been all this media play, this mainstream media play, trying to say like, oh, well, these by-elections are a referendum on Justin Trudeau. They may well be, but the reality is that these two by-elections, the NDP should win them, okay? We are in a change election and the NDP should win them. And here's why. Again, link in the comments. There's links to this. You can read all of this stuff. But the first by-election is in Winnipeg. And this is a seat that has been held for the better part of several decades by the NDP. So if Jagmeet Singh loses this seat, it would be a stunning repudiation by the working class people in Elmwood Transcona saying, this deal with the Liberals and the carbon tax and all the crazy stuff that's led to crime in that community that I'm well aware of. I have family members in that riding, that it's not working. But if the NDP are viable, they should win that by a landslide as they have in the past. The other by-election is in a Montreal area seat that they have a guy, the NDP has a guy running there who is a prominent city councillor in the area. He sort of self-describes as part of the architect of the NDP breakthrough in Quebec in 2011 under Jack Layton. And he was recently quoted in an Ottawa area newspaper as saying that he felt like the NDP was poised to win and take that seat, which has been held by the Liberals for a long period of time. So he's set expectations really high for an NDP win, not just in Elmwood-Transcona, but also in Montreal. So if the NDP, you know, can't anything short of a loss in Montreal now for JAGMEET Singh, I mean, if I was a member of his caucus, I'd be going, where's the win? Like, where's our path to victory, right? You know, and it's worth reemphasizing the fact that he's had very senior members of his caucus say, you know, not this time, I'm not reoffering. And not just one or two, it's quite a few as a percentage of his caucus overall. That suggests to me that there's trouble brewing in leftist paradise. I think part of the reason that JAGMEET Singh too is propping up or instructing his caucus to prop up the Liberal government, beyond everything that I've said, is that the federal NDP have not thought, they can't accept the fact that people are rejecting this brand of very passé, woke, leftist socialism that has failed many Canadians. And I say that in a very nonpartisan perspective because I know there's many Canadians that would have considered voting for the Liberals or the NDP in the past that are going, what you are selling us does not work. You are selling us something that does not work. And yet the NDP and the Liberals, they keep leaning into this like ideology with like you can just see, like sometimes I talk to, you know, colleagues from other parties and you can just see that they cannot wrap their brain around that it's not working, right? And I think that's part of the JAGMEET Singh's problem too, is that he refuses to think that there is a different way. And so he's just continuing to prop up the Liberal government. And that lack of creativity, that lack of honesty, that like, we've all been in situations, everybody here who's watching this, you've probably done something in your life where you're like, okay, this isn't working anymore. I need to make a change, right? The fact that the federal NDP are incapable, like literally their voting record shows this, incapable of thinking about, you know, what comes next or how to change direction. And instead they just keep reverting to supporting Justin Trudeau is insane. And so I think that's part of the reason too why they continue to prop up the Liberals is they lack courage and creativity. And we need both of those things in Canada right now. We've got really serious problems that need to be solved, and they need to be solved in a courageous way that keeps our country together and peaceful. And, you know, and inspire Canadians of all backgrounds into a national vision that leads towards prosperity. Instead, you've got the NDP propping up the Liberals with a consistent brand of divisive politics that seek to divide rather than unite, and seek to incite class warfare and trying to lift instead of trying to make everybody more prosperous, right? So this has been a video that has been long coming for me. Many of you, I have heard this so many times. Michelle, why is JAGMEET Singh propping up the Liberals? Why is JAGMEET Singh propping up the Liberals? Well, that's a question for him, and that's a question for his caucus to ask him, right? Like, I see all of this as a lay observer in the House of Commons. I clearly see what's going down, and it boggles my mind. It boggles my mind that, you know, they can't see it. And that in enough tells me that, you know, this guy, like, his caucus should be having a hard look at his leadership, and that they're not fit to govern, and they're certainly not fit to be sort of like the key definition of which policies get put forward in Canada and which don't, like the key sort of deciding factor. So, you know, we've all focused on Justin Trudeau. We should also be giving JAGMEET Singh and his NDP the same amount of scrutiny, and his leadership the same amount of scrutiny. And if his caucus were smart, they would be doing the same thing right now. So please share this video, subscribe to these channels, because if you don't subscribe, you know, Justin Trudeau's censorship bills, they just, you know, they just quiet any dissenting voices. So, but again, everything that I've talked about is in the article. It's in the comments, or if you're watching on YouTube, it's in the link to the video description. And click subscribe so that you can get these analysis from me without having to deal with Justin Trudeau's censorship bill. So, working hard for you. Have a great day.
Everyone has an opinion about Canadian federal politics.
Oh, yeah.
So we're gonna wrap it up there, guys. Do you still think that it's just about Jagmeet's pension, or is Michelle Rempel Garner onto something? I'm not sure. My name's Aaron, this is Canadian Looney. We're covering Canadian federal politics right here, learning what we can, sharing it with you. Like, subscribe, share, get notified, all those fun things. Please leave a comment. I do love the comments. We'll catch you next video. Thank you for watching this one. Catch you next time.